Art has become a conventional aesthetic that deprives either a visual or an experience into a human mind and formulates a specific memory that the audience sometimes may never forget. Natively, art started from the Greeks as they drew visuals on sculptures from wood, marble, stones, and emphasized architectures of their temples. Gods and goddesses were key elements in their artistic context that Greeks used, which corresponded to a mythical narrative. Later came the painting revolution, where visuals were drawn on a canvas through oil-colored pigments that gave visuals a unique identity. This medium dominated the human art exploration, as many famous painters emerged from this medium and innovated the industry with their peculiar techniques. Dali, Degas, Michelangelo, Matisse, Picasso, and Van Gogh are some of the greatest names that today's society recognizes and pays tremendous amount of respect for their fine artistry. Visual innovation later came through the medium of photography, as it allowed humans to capture a real-life moment and physically store it on a piece of paper. Photography impacted many global industries such as fashion and news, and casually withdrew audience away from paintings. With photography's expansion, film stepped in to capture movement and created animated scenes for the audience to awe upon. Essentially, with every new technology, there is a death of an older technology, which allows a new technology to dominate itself worldwide. This ideology was brought up by the famous Canadian philosopher Marshall McLuhan, who predicted this phenomenon way before the birth of the internet. In today's era, with technology advancing exponentially, many artists have turned to the internet and created new mediums to visually present their interest in art. The first prime example of internet art was witnessed in 1980, illustrated by Kit Galloway and Cherry Rabinowitz. Their art piece was named Hole in Space, which connected New York and Los Angeles with a live video chat on the street. Cameras were placed on Lincoln Center of New York and Broadway store in LA, where commuters or audience passing by could see each other and lively communicate for the first time. The artist used NASA's developing technology to stream the video at 30 to 45 megabits per second, which wasn't available to an average user at that time. Hence, this was the mother of all video chats that was established to create communication system for users to experience living in a different part of America. Another pioneer installation in communicative art was developed by two Toronto artists, Norman White and Doug Back. Both artists created a physical installation which allowed two users to arm wrestle across two countries. The installation was named Telephonic Arm Wrestling, which contextualized the arms race scare that was establishing between the United States of America and Russia in the 1980s.
The idea started with a fellow artist named Doug Back, who was drinking beer one night with his friend, and they talked about how great it would be if they could set up a system where Reagan, who was the president of the United States at the time, could arm wrestle with Gorbachev, who was in the Kremlin, whenever the United States and Russia ran into difficulties. So they, instead of solving their problems with missiles and violence, they could just do it with arm wrestling via telephone. Now, it was very crude technology. This would have been 1986 or thereabouts. But the modems were there. This was pre-internet, but it was the days of bulletin board systems, BBSs, where people called local bulletin boards and left messages for each other that way. And so the modems existed, and the motor technology existed, and it was just a question of integrating existing systems and so forth. So this fellow who is the Dr. Derek de Kerkhoff, who is the head of the McLuhan program at the University of Toronto, heard about this, and he loved the idea. There was a telecommunications event coming up in Salerno, Italy, and he said, we have to have this as part of the overall show. So anyway, he said, don't worry about building it. I have connections with the University of Toronto Robotics Department. We'll get them to build it for us. Well, it turned out the robotics department would build it all right, but they wanted $75,000 to build it. And we didn't have that kind of money, neither did Derek. So we basically built it from junk. Doug used a torque wrench from auto mechanics. We had a couple of those that would tell us how hard somebody was pushing on the arm. And then we got motors out of old printers. And I put together the electronics. Doug was concentrating on the mechanics, and I was concentrating on the electronics. And we brought these technologies together. And we first demonstrated it at Paris between Toronto, the Art Resource Center here in Toronto, and the Canadian Culture Center in Paris.
Norman White and Doug Back embarked on a physical philosophy of creating mediums that a user can interact with. Initially, in today's era, many artists have used the same ideology to innovate art movement through social connectivity. Virtual examples for this category were witnessed in Golden Levin's Dumpster and Jonathan Harris and Sepp Kamvar's We Feel Fine. Both projects utilized blog posts from several internet sources and created a visual interaction that defined an artist's message. The Dumpster exhibits breakup of human beings using real posting of online blogs. It's a deep interactional visualization of romantic relationships. Similarly, We Feel Fine examines human feelings and emotions using the phrase I feel or I am feeling from several blogging communities. In both projects, a numerous amount of data is gathered and categorized through gender, age, and other demographics. The manifest of the Internet assimilates both projects and summarizes human activities associated with the Internet. Virtuality of an art interaction provides a different exploration and aesthetic feel compared to a physical installation. Similar to Norman White, Steve Daniels is a current new media artist who involves a lot of his interactivity artwork based upon social media and internet behavior. Steve's artworks often involve robotic movements coordinated through human behavior and interaction.
40 years ago, new media practices were rooted in video, explorations of the body in relationship to media. And the internet has expanded what artists can do with those technologies. We have the potential now to create works that not only communicate with audience, but that communicate with each other. And this is really redefining how we engage our worlds, how we engage what we think of as object, how we engage what we think of as art, and how we think of communication in its most intimate details.
Internet has solidified artworks to transform themselves and become part of human identity. Embodying physical objects with internet connectivity have allowed artists to create personas and characters that humans can interact with. Ramona Pringle, a researcher in digital identity, believes the internet has fostered the emergence of new innovative identities and storytelling. In the present day, users are able to create their own personas online and share their stories through digital networking. Moreover, objects, machines, and robots are built to work for and imitate human life.
Originally, if you look at Renaissance work, a lot of work was the relationship between God and humans, and that humans were created in God's image. And we wanted to figure out what it meant to be human and what it meant to be the subject that was created by this God. All of a sudden now we're in the internet age where you can create an online persona, you can create an avatar. We've got, these robots that are practically becoming human. And so we're now in almost the second stage of figuring out what it means to be human, what it means to be, what the essence of the human condition is, what our identity is, whereby it's no longer that God creates man in his image, but in a sense that we're creating this next generation in our own image. So it's the same questions, but it's almost on this existential, massive scale.
Artworks like Botanicals by Katie London, Rob Faludi, and Kate Hartman, and the radical exploration of machinima exhibits the aforementioned viewpoints. Botanical utilizes a computational kit that offers a connection between the user and their plants via digital interaction through Twitter and mobile phones. Using sensors and network, plants embody the human identity through technological mediums that tweets back to its owner as its water is deprived. It essentially humanified objects in the form of an interactive communication. Likewise, machinima allows users to develop their own characters, identities, and narratives via online connectivity. It's an interplay between the computer machine and cinema, whereas rather than rendering through computer animation, Users link with each other through virtual interconnectivity to record live action footages in video games. Examining these interactive artworks, the internet has surely evolved the norms of art creation and presentation. Now, in all this gigantic art revolution, how do McLuhan's theories apply to interconnected artworks? McLuhan's theories are the social base for all the recent artworks. Every single artist has applied their creativity to innovate the art mediums and yield a completely new perception. All interconnected artwork have the notion of collaboration that involves the social community and human activities.
Oh, and I was invited to a conference at York University to speak on a panel. This would have been in mid-70s, and McLuhan was on the same panel, and I was listening very carefully to what he was saying. McLuhan came on at the end and said how he felt very comfortable among the other panelists because we were all dealing with perception, percepts instead of concepts. And that made me, that put a bee in my ear, and I started thinking, what is the difference between percepts and concepts? Percepts is how we perceive the world, how we digest the things that are going around us, how we integrate our cultures and all that. That's done perceptually, not conceptually. Concepts is forcing ideas on things that may not necessarily be natural ideas. They're mainly ideas to gain attention or something like that. But percepts are somehow grounded in reality, if they're good percepts.
Similarly, hot media, also known as media created by few individuals, has surrounded human society throughout ages. However, with the innovation of the internet, the global world has seen a shift into cold media, where regular audiences create artworks or even entertain human society.
If hot media is media that is produced by the traditional media practitioner, the person who has been trained, the person who has been gone through school, or the massive team, right? The 200,000 people that were required, I don't know if that's the exact number, but to produce Life of Pi, let's say, this massive vision. And the flip side being cold media, which is created by the user, by the audience, more sort of user-generated, which has its own aesthetic. I think the internet, in a sense, has fostered both. I mean, on one way, internet culture means that we want everything for free. It's a freedom culture. And it's really, really hard to pay for films that require 200,000 people to make them when we want them for free. So there's politically and economically some issues that go on. At the same time, there's access. People can access all of this incredible information, and it inspires them to want to make their own. I firmly believe that when it comes to art, there's always going to be room for both.
Hot media and cold media. Hot media, he was against. Hot media is like images and videos that are high resolution, very hot. They leave nothing to the imagination. It's all there, already heavily defined. Cold media is like print media and low-res television, and I saw my work as cold media. It required a lot of imagination to take it into the people's minds who were watching it, and they would then make something of it.
McLuhan's philosophies identify today's digital era as new technological mediums impact the society in different and unique ways. Laws of media initially dwell upon new technology and close out other old medium to innovate the global world.
The internet rolls along somewhere in the 90s and shifts the possibilities of networked art, and we actually all land for quite a long time in our screens. We live in a world of networked arts that exists for mouse-pressed interactive systems. And then we roll into social media at some point in the early 2000s, and we begin another shift in what's possible with networked art. People start to figure out that within the context of networks, we can not just speak at each other, but we can listen as well. And we start to create dialogues within our network-based artworks. And it's within those dialogues that things start to really explode. In parallel with that, a whole new collection of devices appears in the form of handheld smartphones, Android, iPhones, iPads. All of these platforms begin again to shift what becomes possible and how we can speak with each other.
The medium becomes the internet in several artists' message. The world has shifted towards a new way for creating content and accessing it, which contextualizes several artworks. Artists daily try to find new ways of expressing this concept and summarizing it with unique visuals.
In Paleolithic times, you had the caves of Lascaux, and people were documenting their lives. They were documenting survival and the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows of really being human and their daily life. That's what the caves of Lascaux document. And you flash forward to 20 years ago, and MTV originated the series called The Real World, and it was documenting the real lives of real people. And it was revolutionary because it wasn't actors and it wasn't fictional. And all of a sudden now we've got Facebook, and in a sense, it's the same story that was told. It's the same story that was in the caves of Lascaux. It's the same story that at first we explored through actors on a stage and Shakespeare, and then it was explored through reality TV in the real world. And all of a sudden now it's the exact same show. It's survival. It's doing what it takes to get ahead. It's the ebbs and flows of the daily human experience, only now it's populated by a cast of characters that are your own friends. And in a sense, you wake up every morning and you log in, and you're just seeing, who's made up, who's broken up, and it really is, it's social survival.
Lastly, the medium is the message, or the massage, has significantly influenced today's artworks and other industries. For example, many new artworks often involve a whole new medium or an innovated way of expressing a perception to fully idealize today's artistry.
And so I do think there is the possibility with the internet of perhaps more outlets and more ways of getting discovered and different kinds of voices. And if anything, it's not that it's one or the other, that it's cold media, hot media. Is it all UGC? Is it all, big blockbusters all the time? But I think what we're going to see is more and more genres emerging. Now there's, Hollywood talent agents for YouTube stars. And so it's this middle ground. And I think if anything, you're just going to see more categories. And hopefully that means more opportunities.
Eventually, the ideology presented by McLuhan has impacted humanity since the creation of media. McLuhan was the first to observe this idea and transformed his theory into a logical phenomenon. Internet has been the key tool to simply support McLuhan's theories and collaboratively brought the social community together to engage and create new human movements. Essentially, the human race is at the peak where McLuhan's theories predicted. However, what's after the peak? Perhaps a biological connection or other communication systems innovated for humans to simply live upon.